Hi, I'm Hannah Sullins, and my presentation is about children with disabilities who are more likely to suffer abuse and neglect. So, just from an overview about some disabilities before we get into the problem and the solution. One common form of disability is autism, and typically they have troubles communicating, judging social cues, which means if someone walks in the room that they think is cute, maybe they'll go up and kiss them because they don't know that that's not something you can do. They have trouble processing some information, and then they also have some trouble with some abstract ideas. And then cerebral palsy is classified as a developmental delay. They have muscle rigidness and they're very tense, so they might hold their hand like this or like keep their arm like this, so they can have physical therapy and things to help them relax a little bit. They have muscle spasm and just poor muscle tone pretty much everywhere. One common one that I'm sure all of you are aware of is Down syndrome, which is also classified as a developmental delay. They have an extra chromosome and some almond eyes, which is a characteristic that you can physically see. And then another common one is ADHD or ADD. They're hyperactive, have trouble concentrating, things like that. So the prevalence of disabilities, this graph is for children ages 3 to 17. Typically, they don't diagnose anyone with a disability until they're around 4. So that way they can give them time to catch up. Maybe they're just behind in some milestones, not a big deal. But the top is developmental delay, and I listed some reminders about what those are: cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, and a traumatic brain injury. So I'm sure you're aware if you get in like a car wreck or you get in some kind of accident, you hit your head really hard, you can get a TBI, and it just causes some different problems. Autism is next. Cognitive disorder, followed by ADHD, Tourette's, which is sometimes people can have a tic. Sometimes they clear their throat a lot, or they blink a lot, or they twitch, and then there's some more severe forms, followed by anxiety and depression. So if you see developmental delay, it's 82.9% of children that are diagnosed with a disability. That's the one they have. And so this is another graph just to show the prevalence, but specifically I want to look at the very top one, specific learning disabilities. And then the third one from the bottom, multiple disabilities. So if you see how high the learning disability is and the multiple disabilities, that'll be key for the next slide. So we'll reference back to that. So the problem, according to an article I read by McLean, children with disabilities are more likely to suffer abuse and neglect. Intellectual disabilities being at the highest, which is, if we go back one slide, the learning disability. And then children with this, if they have more than one disability, they're at a higher risk. So a lot of times children with disabilities can have autism and Down syndrome, or another combination of two. Cerebral palsy and autism are another common combination. And then, so an interesting fact, children with disabilities only make up about 10.4% of the population, yet they make up 25% of abuse claims. Why is this an issue though? Like, why are children with disabilities more likely than any other child to suffer abuse? Well, I read 2 different articles that offered that solution, or as to why this would happen. According to McLean, the same one we just talked about, she thinks it's because of the lack of knowledge about disabilities worldwide. Like, no one is really truly aware of how many needs they have, how much personal care it takes, or how much time it takes to take care of them. And then according to a different article by Woodman, he thinks that parents just get really stressed, and then they internalize that stress and they just think, wow, I let my child down, I'm not a good enough parent. And then they just keep cycling, so they just keep going in a downward spiral, and then eventually they don't care because they already let their child down so much. My opinion is, I think parents get disappointed or sad when their child gets diagnosed, because no one wants their child to grow up like that if they don't have to. And then I also think that they just don't get very much training. They might get a pamphlet or some links to look at or some tips, but do they really get taught how to attend to behaviors of a child that has autism, or to help a child with Down syndrome grow up and get a job like everyone else? And then from experience working with children with disabilities, it is a lot of work. And a lot of parents, I don't think, are prepared because they didn't know. They didn't have time to prepare and picture their future like that. And they might not be willing. It takes a lot. So, and I referenced this picture to the side. This little girl, just to go out to eat, she has her feeding tube, a trach, her wheelchair, her oxygen, just to go on a family outing. It takes a lot of work. But as you see my last bullet point, it's so worth it. Like, she's adorable. They're worth the time and they're worth all of the hassle sometimes. So, some possible solutions. In one word, to sum up the two articles I read for this, is education. So, according to the first one by Orlov, he thinks that education will make it more doable for parents. They'll be less stressed about it. They'll have a little bit more knowledge about what they're doing, so they're not as overwhelmed with just all these machines and medications and doctor's appointments. And then, according to another article by Hibbard, he thinks that pediatricians are a key in making this problem go away. They can advocate for the children because they'll see them all the time. They'll have tons of doctor's appointments. And then early detection in the womb can give parents more time and more resources to prepare for this child. And then simply, if they're more educated, the parents will be more educated. And then putting all of this information in easy to understand forms. So this chart right here, it's probably aimed toward a child, but it has the 6 F words for CP: function, family, fitness, friends, fun, and future. No, that's not going to cover everything that a parent will need to know about their child that if they have CP, but it's easier. It gets easy to know. They can glance at it for reference, and it's just less overwhelming than a 20-page pamphlet that has big words in it that they're not going to understand. So some more solutions, in my opinion, is, like I mentioned before, if they detect it earlier in the womb, the parents will have more time to learn themselves, to get actual training, to find support groups with other people who have children with the same disabilities, to just, have a village to raise this child with. And then just simply time to mentally prepare and wrap your mind around the fact that the life of this child may not be as you pictured it, but it's still going to be great. And then more acceptance of disabilities worldwide. That will make it less stressful for parents to have to tube feed their child in public or to have to push a wheelchair in public. And then might remove the stigma of being disappointed or sad that your child got diagnosed with Down syndrome or Tourette's or cerebral palsy. If everyone else is more accepting, those parents are more likely to be more accepting of their own child, and therefore abuse and neglect is less likely to happen. So I just want to wrap it up with a positive note on how the world is doing with people with disabilities now. We have progress. Person first language is a thing. Instead of saying that autistic child, you say that child with autism. Put the child before the diagnosis. And the R word isn't really used anymore. People are starting to steer away from using it as an adjective or a descriptive thing rather than the diagnosis that it is. And then the first boy with autism was offered a D1 scholarship for basketball. A boy with cerebral palsy was signed with Nike for cross country. He's the first Nike sponsorman person. Great. And then different technologies can help with different symptoms of things. I had a boy at camp that I worked at that had autism, and he was undergoing split brain surgery because he had really bad seizures. So he got the surgery, and now his seizures almost have disappeared. So different technologies are helping children and adults with disabilities become more normal and more adaptive to our world. And then I referenced some pictures. This boy in the wheelchair, his name is Donnie. He was at camp with me. He's on a boat. He's having fun. They can do everything that we do. They might need a little more adaptations or a little more time to do so, but they will do it. And then this girl, her name is Nora. I babysit her. She has cerebral palsy, and she is just as fun as anyone I know. She's probably one of my best friends. So just wanted to wrap it up on a positive note and say that they're still people and they deserve the world as well. And here are my references that I used. And thank you for watching.